Hey, Sasha, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you. Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited to see your faces.
I know you too. How is the holiday season going for you so far?
Oh, it's a whirlwind, honestly. I feel like the dates between Thanksgiving, I love Thanksgiving. It's my favorite holiday, actually,
Oh,
because you just get to eat food and gather. I mean, I just bring pies. I don't really have to cook. So I have an easy Thanksgiving gig, but it's just so quick. It goes so fast. So I'm trying
hmm.
to make sure I have all the gifts and I remembered everybody on my list, but it's going good.
Well, and today we're talking boundaries, which, is not necessarily a topic that people are always excited to talk about because boundaries are hard. And sometimes we don't even know just do I have boundaries? Do I have good boundaries? Do I
Hmm.
have poor boundaries? We just don't even know kind of how to address this whole thing. So let's just go big picture for a second and talk about what are boundaries and how do we assess ourselves within those?
So boundary, I like to think of a boundary as anything that allows you to live your priorities. And it allows you to match what you say in your heart are your priorities with what is on your calendar.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of us have a list of priorities that maybe we don't even voice out loud, maybe once a year, our New Year's resolutions or something. But I think if most of us would sit down and I would say, Crystal, what are your priorities? You'd probably list your family. You'd probably list your faith. You'd probably list your friends, your mission. You might put your health in there. But then if you actually open your calendar, it's very convicting at times when we look and see, well, are those really our priorities? Because
Hmm.
what's on our calendar is often work, volunteering, activities that we get asked to do that don't necessarily reflect what we say our priorities are. And so a boundary is a way that you can express very transparently to the people that you do life with, work with, live with, what your priorities are and how you're going to align your time and energy with those priorities.
Oh my
Mm.
gosh.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say that things that came to mind for me are things that I have 100% control over. Nobody else is involved in how much time I spend on my phone. Like
Mm,
already, I'm like, oh, priorities. The
Mhm.
list you gave are probably like my list of priorities, my family, my health. And where are the places where I'm spending time and energy that aren't really feeding into those priorities? And
yes.
automatically, I'm like, every day I spend 20 minutes on Instagram, like
Yeah.
kind of shameful thinking. But
20 minutes
we,
is pretty good.
Yeah.
well, am I being really honest? Let's just
Yeah.
ask me that. How vulnerable am I being right now? Uh, but and I can think of other habits that I might
Mm,
have that
mhm.
really I need to work on that boundary with myself
Yes.
because the
Yes.
boundary isn't even with another person. Though I think we all have things that we need to talk to
Absolutely.
other people about too, but it
Absolutely.
can also be an issue with our own just habits and behavior, right?
Absolutely. And I talk about that in the book that recently came out that I wrote on boundaries is the biggest aha for me about boundaries was that I have to have them with me. And it starts with me. I always thought a boundary was something that you always express to another human, which a lot of the time they are. But the biggest boundaries and the biggest struggles that I have in my life, almost always, it's because I haven't respected my own boundary. And I haven't even assessed what that boundary would be. So I think it's really important that we recognize that we are often living in a way that doesn't really reflect our priorities, and it's because we lack
Mhm.
boundaries.
Yes. And I just keep going back to this whole idea, even though I already said it, is that we don't even know what we want or what they are. And so I think sometimes we kind of shoot from the hip and well, first of all, we react. So we play defense, not offense. So that is true. And then also, we just don't take the time to reflect on how our boundaries or how our time is lining up with our priorities. We just don't. And
Yeah.
so, what exercise do you recommend to even begin to help people begin that process?
Well, Krista, I love that you said that because that's exactly where I have everyone start. So the first thing that I tell women that every woman needs is a boundary around time with herself every single day. Quiet time with yourself every single day. And if you don't have that boundary, that's the number one boundary that is going to allow you to set those other boundaries, to even have what I call in the book a boundary inventory. Because most of us have really strong boundaries in certain areas of our life, and we have zero boundaries in other areas, and it's very individualized. It's very specific to an individual. And if you don't have time alone, if you don't have a boundary around your time alone every day, you don't have the capacity to self-assess and really take your pulse, so to speak, and say, why am I so stressed this week? Why am I having so much anxiety? Why do I feel disconnected from my work or my partner or my kids or my husband or my spouse? Oh, it's because I have let my boundaries slip on X, Y, or Z. But if you don't have time with yourself, you don't even have the space to do that assessment. And so one exercise I have women do that take my classes, that read the book, is I have them incorporate at minimum 15 minutes every day to take that assessment. And I can tell you, I've been doing this now for 7 or 8 years. And when I wake up in the morning, my default is not to spend time alone. My brain still says, you have too many things to do today. You don't have time to spend 15 minutes on yourself. You got to start doing the list, empty the dishwasher, throw in a load of laundry, make the coffee, go, go, go. And I have to tell myself, no, I have a boundary with myself every day. And I don't grab my cell phone, and I don't look at my inbox, and I don't start laundry, and I don't turn on the dishwasher. I spend time with myself. And it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do. If you ask most women, if you spend 15 minutes alone, not on your cell phone or social media, they don't. So it's a gift, but it's an amazing boundary to set. It's the most important first one.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And I love that that's just so real, because even though, I'm the same way, even though I have that habit, every day I will wake up with a brain that says override, override, override. And I'm like, what is that about? When will I ever get to the place where I'm not wanting to override, because I just automatically go into go mode? It is the brain is so interesting, isn't it?
Yes. And it is a neural pathway that has been formed since we were young. And so fighting against it takes energy and takes focus and takes a habit. I once heard, I can't think of his name right now because of course I want to, but he's a very famous golfer. He's won tons of PGA tournaments. And he said that he works on his swing every day for an hour and a half, every single morning. It's the first thing he does. And he said he's been doing this for 25 years, and he gets up every morning and he doesn't want to do it. Every single morning he gets up and has to talk himself into going and working on his golf swing. And he tells himself, like, I don't want to do this. I don't need to do it. And then afterwards he's like, I needed to do that. So it was so eye-opening for me, because I thought, okay, this is not just Sasha. This is a constant, a neural pathway that we have to fight against, that our ego really is just telling us, we don't need that. We need to do these other things. And you just got to shut it down and toggle up and do what you promised yourself you're going to do.
And I can't think of honestly a better time to be talking about this than at Christmas time, because who is not in like complete full throttle go mode at Christmas time? Every one of us. And yet I know for me, I'll never forget, I talk about this a lot, Christmas Eve, crying in front of I literally sat down at night and had the lights on in front of the Christmas tree. And I was crying because I had missed Christmas. I literally missed it because I was I did all the things, but I didn't feel full inside. I felt like I had missed the heart of Christmas because I had just been going. And so I really want to get back to this idea. And that's why I love this conversation so much, that we can do all the things and miss our life. We can literally miss our life because we never slow down to really consider what is important to us and what is important in this season. We're at Christmas. What is important in this season that we really want to focus on that is going to make our heart and our life full?
Yes. And I love that you're asking this question because I've been talking a lot about boundaries around the holidays with people, and most of us have an expectation that someone else has of us around the holidays that may not bring us joy, may actually bring us stress, maybe something that we feel that we are obligated to do, that it actually causes us a lot of anxiety and stress around the holidays. And oftentimes we need to set a boundary around it. Maybe it's a family member, maybe it's spending money or buying gifts that we don't think that we don't have the capacity to do this year. Maybe it's an expectation of cooking, like, okay, you're going to bake the, 12 dozen cookies for the cookie exchange. Whatever it is, that you need to actually be honest and set a boundary around, but you have such anxiety around it. And what I love about setting boundaries is, number one, you might need a boundary this year that you don't need next year. Next year, you can do those things. And next year, you're maybe in a different place with this family member or this event. But give yourself permission to set a boundary that in your gut or your heart, your mind, that you need to set. Give yourself permission and you will be surprised at how often the narrative that you've created around how stressful this is going to be, or people are going to be mad at me, or I'm going to disappoint them, or I'm going to ruin their holiday, it doesn't exist. When you set the boundary and you get through it, even if you do have a little boundary backlash, I call it, you're going to survive, and you're going to realize, like, I made that such a bigger deal in my brain and so much harder than it needs to be. And now I have this freedom to do the thing that I really wanted, to not miss the holiday, to be present, to be there, because I'm not doing all these other things that people expect of me during the holidays.
Yeah. Yes, that is true. And it's the anticipation is often worse than the actual conversation, right?
100%.
And so how do we push through to promise ourselves this actually is going to be better if I set this boundary? Because the thing that keeps us from doing it is because we think that the conversation is going to be so hard, it's not going to be worth setting the boundary.
Yes. So very common to feel this guilt associated with setting a boundary, and that you're being a bad person, you're letting other people down, when in fact, it may be actually life-saving for you to set a boundary. And I'm being honest because, as a physician who works in healthcare, I can tell you that the majority of cardiac events we have happen around the holidays. People are overstretched, they are over-functioning, they are overdoing, they're overeating, they're over-drinking, and they're showing up and they're exhausted for things because it's an expectation. So when you feel like, so many people go, I don't have the energy to do that. I'm going to only sleep for 2 hours if I do this thing, but I'm going to do it anyway because the anticipation of saying no is worse, right? So what I tell people is you got to find your 20 seconds of brave, 20 seconds of courage. Okay. You find it. It's not going to feel great. It's going to feel icky when you're going to feel nervous. Your voice may crack. You may find yourself wanting to apologize and promise all these silly things that you don't need to promise. Say no, be transparent, be open. So often women lie about boundary setting because they don't want to be transparent. So instead of saying, I can't make it to the Christmas cookie exchange because I have no capacity this year to do that, we say, I can't make it because I have to go to this basketball game when there is no basketball game, right? Like, just find your 20 seconds of brave, push through the discomfort. You will actually get more respect, probably, that you were honest about it. And I often tell people, when you become a woman who sets boundaries and is transparent and is honest about your capacity and your time and energy, you become a woman who other people can be honest with, because other people say, well, I can tell her now how I'm doing, how I'm feeling, that I can't make XYZ, or that I don't want to go on this trip or day trip here or whatever it is. So find your 20 seconds of brave, and you're going to see that people actually most people are understanding. They will respect you for being honest with them, and they're still going to invite you for the next thing. They're not going to just write you off because you said no and set a boundary.
Do you have a script that you think is helpful for women who really struggle with this, or some kind of lead in that you feel like makes it easier to say the words?
I have something called the boundary model that I talk about, the brave boundary model in the book, and it's super easy. The first thing is to ask yourself, what do I know to be true? And what that question does is it removes the drama. So we tend let's say, that you asked me to come to a party and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if I don't go to this party, she's not going to come to my party. She's going to think I'm a bad person. Like, none of that is true. The fact is you asked me to go to something I can't go. So the question, what is true, just takes out all this narrative and drama that we create in our brain. The second thing is what is the boundary I need to set? I need to actually set time limit on my weekend that I'm spending away from my kids and my spouse and holiday enjoyment. I don't have time for this, or I don't have the money for this, or whatever it is. And then the third thing is, how do I express the boundary? I just need to say it. Do I need to text it? Do I need to email it? Do I need to call? What's the appropriate boundary response here? Because it's different for the situation. And then setting the time and date to do it, and just ripping the Band-Aid off and getting it over with. Because what we do often is we delay our no. And a delayed no always becomes a yes. And then it becomes a yes we don't like and we don't want to do, but we're there because we delayed the no. So I don't have like a script, so to speak, but I have the model. And when you do it, I have women, for example, they'll get asked to do something at work that's not on their job description. They don't get paid to do. And they use this model all the time. And they're like, it was actually so much easier than I thought it was going to be. Or another thing is boundaries with your spouse, boundaries with your kids, huge. Use the model on them, like, I love you, but I cannot go to the soccer game tonight. I have to do X because I need to rest. I had huge, weird narratives about this in my brain. Like, if I tell my son I can't make his soccer game because I'm tired, he's going to turn out terrible and he's going to think I'm the worst mom. So I used to make up excuses or kill myself to go to a basketball game or soccer game when I hadn't been up all night at the hospital. And now I just say, I can't go tonight. I love you. I'm cheering for you from home, from my pajamas. And you know what? He still loves me. So that is a really good model to use.
And I kept thinking when you were talking that if we drill down, we can get really deep with this. Like, drill down. Why am I saying yes? Why do I feel like I can't set this boundary? What is going on inside of me? What's going on in between this person and myself that is not allowing me to feel the freedom to do that, or that I'm just choosing to not do that. And so I think even, drilling down, we can get to some significant places that probably need to be looked at in that as well.
But can feel really scary.
Yeah.
Very scary, especially if, we are living kind of this martyr, ego-filled servant, kind of, so to speak. And I think a lot of women especially tell ourselves well, I have to show up for this. Well, I have to serve this person. Well, I have to say yes to this because I'm a good person. I'm a servant. I'm a Christian. I'm this. And it actually feeds our ego. And we become people pleasers, and we love that. We love when people are happy with us. So it's not that I'm saying we shouldn't serve others, but when you're serving others at the expense of your own health, that is not right. That's not what we're called to do. And when you're working in this shero complex or this martyr complex, either one is really unhealthy. And so the question that you said about going deeper, so smart, because when you ask yourself, why am I afraid to say I can't do this? Is it because I'm holding on to this person liking me or thinking highly of me? And most of that comes from a really dangerous place of ego. We don't realize it's our ego until we start asking ourselves. But we don't want anyone to think that we don't have the energy, or we don't have the capacity, or we're not good people, or we're not there for them. And, I heard something in the last couple of months that rocked my core. It said, a friend of mine said, that speaks a lot. She said, are you ready? Are you willing for people to be wrong about you? to live the life you're supposed to live. And I was like, oh man, because there are going to be people when you set boundaries, especially the people that were benefiting from you having no boundaries.
Yes.
That are going to be angry, or they're going to be bitter, or they're going to be frustrated. Are you okay with that, to live the healthier life that you know you're called to live?
Oh, yes. And I that was actually my next question for you was, what do we do when people don't accept our boundaries or punish us for our boundaries or make us feel bad or resent us for boundaries? What do we do then?
Then we don't have them. That's why we don't have them. You're putting me into cardiac arrest here, Krista. It's stressing me out. But yeah, what do we do when that happens,
Yeah.
Sasha?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. If you look at most people's response to boundaries, it's, about 30% of people are going to be like, okay, cool. And they're just going to keep going on with their day. They don't, it's like a blip. It's a big deal to us, but to them, it's like, oh, whatever. And they just go on, because most people are so busy. They're just trying to get through their own stuff. Right.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have this group that's about 40% of people are like, huh, what? I don't get it. But then they just they're just indifferent. And then you're going to have, 15% or so who get really either angry. And most of the anger is because they were benefiting from you not having boundaries. Or they're jealous. Second response, jealousy. So they're jealous that you have a boundary that they didn't think they could have, or they don't give themselves that permission. So this is a very common thing, especially I hear in the workplace, like, well, she doesn't go to this dinner meeting at night. Well, why do I have to go? Well, you don't. You can set a boundary too, right? So a lot of times we get jealousy, but when you get that negative feedback, that our instant response is that we've done something wrong and we want to apologize. And I always say the best comeback when you get anger from setting a boundary is a thank you. Thank you. Because what it does is it like stuns the person, because they are expecting you to say, I'm so sorry, or I'm sorry I disappointed you, or you don't want to say that because you haven't done anything wrong when you stand up and set a boundary that results in your health. Okay. And what you need to do is just say, thank you. Thank you for that feedback, and leave it at that. Don't argue, don't engage, because that's what will lead to just more stress and anxiety and maybe conflict. Just say thank you. So, I recently set some pretty hard boundaries around email, and I got some backlash because they were like, well, you haven't answered my email for a week. And I just said, I don't answer email when I'm on vacation. Thank you. That's all I wrote. Like before I would have tried to explain it. And now I'm like, no, I just say thank you. Just thanks for the feedback.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
you, Sasha. Very helpful, Sasha.
Can I ask a question about, you mentioned like this identity of I'm a good person or I'm a Christian. And I think in Christian circles, there is this tension that it is real of I need to carry my cross, that God has given me some burdens that I maybe need to carry on behalf of somebody, maybe somebody in my family. That's real. I feel like I need to do these things. And yet I'm kind of suffocating or dying, or I'm exhausted, and then I'm being told I need to have healthy boundaries as a woman. And so how does a Christian woman look at both of these ideas and find her place in them and discern when is it time to set a boundary and when is it time to serve unselfishly because God is calling me to?
Yeah, well, I don't profess to have all the deep answers, but I will say I get asked this question many times, and I've had this discussion with several women that are Christians, and I always just go back to Jesus. And I think he was the most boundaried person on the planet. I mean, he had the power and capacity to, as a human that none of us had, to save, to heal, to help everybody. He could have put out his shingle from 2 a.m. till, midnight and slept for 2 hours, but he didn't. He was with 12 men that he traveled with. He set boundaries. He escaped and slept and broke bread and said, I'm tired. I'm going to lay down. Like, he was a boundaried human. He didn't help every leper. He didn't heal every person physically that he could have. He had boundaries. He knew what he was meant to do and when he had to be a human and sleep and rest and withdraw. And he didn't pour into the masses. He poured into who he could at that day, that moment, that time. And so I always think back to Christ, and I think, if Christ needed boundaries, then I'm not Christ. I need boundaries. And the other thing is just to go to him. There are times where I'm like, gosh, I have this really great opportunity. It could really help a lot of people, a lot of women. It would take me away from my family for 2 or 3 days, but maybe I should do it because it's like really helpful and it's really, really good. And then I just go back to remembering that, God made me a human being. I have limits. I need sleep. I need to check in with my kids. I can't be somebody who's on the road every weekend speaking or ministering or helping people or coaching women at all hours of the night. That's not what he's called me to do. And so I think it's hard. I definitely want to make sure everybody hears that the closer someone is to you, the harder it is to set a boundary. When you're carrying the burden of like a family member that's struggling, those are really hard boundaries to keep because it's so close to you. The hardest boundaries I set, quite frankly, are with my husband. Those are the hardest ones because I love him the most, right? I want to like serve him and do everything that he wants me to do. And yet I can't. So I think that we have to remember we're human and that give ourselves grace and never, if your lack of boundary is causing you anxiety, depression, unhealthy behaviors, you're finding yourself numbing behaviors, then you've got to set a boundary.
Yeah. Is there ever a time when we go too far? I mean, I'm even thinking about like it's the holidays and let's say there's a family member who never hosts or never, you know what I mean? Like they always set boundaries to the point where it's like awkward and you're like, can you just host this year? Like, you know what I'm saying? I mean,
Yeah.
When does the scale tip and we know that
Yeah.
we've gone too far?
Yeah. Well, I think that's, boundaries are very individualized. Some people throwing a party is amazing. That's in their wheelhouse. Some people don't like to do that. That's extremely stressful for them. You may have a boundary that I don't even consider I would even need that boundary, but I may have a boundary that's like life-saving for me. So I do think that there are differences in the capacity of people. I also think though that we have to be really careful because boundaries are not selfish. When someone's being selfish or self-serving, that's different. Boundaries are healthy protective measures that we put around our own time and energy to keep us having the capacity to serve and be present for our family and our careers and all these things. So there are definitely people that are more self-centered and that's not a boundary. That's just being selfish. Like if you're participating in this event, but you're never hosting or giving the event, then that's not really setting a boundary. That's just being more self-serving. But I do think that sometimes I have had to recognize, even amongst like my friends, that they have boundaries that I'm like, that wouldn't stress. Why do you even need that boundary? And I find myself maybe going to judgment, and I have to remember that I have boundaries that they don't need. So it's very individualized.
Yeah, I could see how that plays out in my life, where I often think, oh, that stresses you out. That's no big deal to me. And on the flip side, wow, I can't believe that doesn't stress you out. That seems so stressful to me.
Yes.
And so I think just allowing people to be who they are too, while maintaining the boundaries that we need.
Yes. And I also think that we need to do that with people in general, because sometimes there are people that, quite frankly, you need a boundary around, that your best friend may be like, that person doesn't. I mean, how many times have you ever received an email and you get the email and you read it and you're like, this is the rudest email ever. And then you show your friend or your spouse and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not rude at all,
Right.
And it's so So we have to just realize that some people are going to trigger us and they're going to anger us or they're going to frustrate us, and they may not frustrate someone else. It doesn't mean they're a bad person, but we need to set some boundaries around that for our own health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Honor. I'm just thinking of the word honor, like
Mhm.
honor ourselves, honor each other, and speak honestly. So honor and honesty, those are the two words I'm kind of coming up with here in this interview. What grid do you run through for whether you should say yes or no to something? Do you have a little system for that?
Yes, the first system that I have, just because I work out, I'm employed, is I ask myself, do I get paid for this? Because if I get paid for it, then I should probably do it. If I'm not getting paid for it, then I ask myself, why do I think I need to do this?
Hmm.
And I think it's really important because we know, because I've actually published this research, women get asked to do things that are not associated with pay more than men. And they're expected to do things that are not associated with pay. And so we get burned out doing things that are actually not part of our job. So I just want to throw that out, because it's not like you're doing something wrong if you say no to something that is not part of your job. So the first filter for me is, is this part of my job? And the second thing is this part of my plan? Like, it may not be part of my job, but I love it, like I want to do it because I love it and it brings me joy. And then the third thing that people often they forget, they get to the joy thing, but they don't get to, is this feasible?
Mm-hmm.
Because we always tend to think we're going to have more energy or more space in our day and our calendar in our month than we do have. So this is a big, hard question for me is this feasible for me? I want to go. I want to do it. I love it. I don't get paid for it, but I don't care because I want to go and speak and be with these people. But is it feasible for me?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the question that we often don't ask ourselves, is that third filter. Like, is this something that I actually am going to be able to show up and stay healthy?
Hmm. Those are great. Great filters. Man, we just had those 3 things written out somewhere. And then every time that we're faced with something, we just run it through that grid. I mean, it really, and be honest, back to honest, be honest about it and answer those questions. So helpful.
Yes.
Well, Sasha, as we close out today, what would you say are just your final words of encouragement as people go into the Christmas holiday and, are just sensing time is running out?
I would say to give yourself permission to set the boundaries you need to enjoy the holiday season, and to be brave enough to find that 20 seconds of brave, to be honest with other people and set boundaries, and to give yourself the same grace that you would give others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you, Sasha. Your book is a gift. It really is. You are a gift. You have so much wisdom to offer. And so if people just want to hear more from you, where can they best find you?
So you can find me at becomebraveenough.com. That's probably the best place. I give a little Friday newsletter every Friday, send it out. So if you want to follow along, that's probably the best place. I'm also on Instagram at becomebraveenough.com.
Thanks, Sasha. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thanks for having me.
Bye.